Hi, my name is Fran Mayer, and welcome to another Napa Institute podcast. Our guest today is Congressman Dan Lipinski, who's concluding this fall a 16-year career in the U.S. House of Representatives from the 3rd Illinois Congressional District in Southwest Chicago. He holds a doctorate in political science from Duke University and taught at the University of Notre Dame and the University of Tennessee before his election to Congress in 2005. A lifelong committed Democrat, he's an equally committed Catholic and has consistently served his convictions about family and marriage, religious liberty, stem cell research, abortion, and related issues in his public life. He's here with us today to talk about Catholics and political responsibility, something he knows about from his own extensive and sometimes costly experience. Congressman, thanks for being with us today.
It's good to be with you.
Congressman, the U.S. Catholic population has, both in terms of percentage and I believe also numerically, declined over the past decade. Why do you suppose that is? And specifically, is there something built into the American environment or personality that works against a vigorously Catholic life?
Well, unfortunately, it's taken a really much steeper drop in recent years, but the number of believers in any faith has dropped significantly in the United States. So it's not just Catholics, Protestants, lower number of Protestants. The number of people who simply have no faith, adhere to no faith at all, has significantly risen. This is a big problem that we face right now in a country. It's especially younger people. Younger people have not really learned, I believe, learned well what it means. As Catholics, I'll just speak about Catholics now. I don't think they've been well catechized as to what it means to be Catholic, why to be Catholic, why we believe what we believe, and there is a real big push out there. I think some of it comes from educational institutions, but in general. There is a real, I certainly see a real scientism out there where the only thing that's rational is scientific, is what a lot of millennials think. And therefore, any kind of religious faith must be something made up. It's not real. It's irrational. And so that's something that we face, and it's not just as Catholics. And I think all faiths face this right now. But for Catholics, I mean, we are losing, Catholics among millennials, the children of who have Catholic parents, maybe even taught in Catholic schools, and they are the number who are adhering to Catholic faith is dropping, and that's something that we really all need to address.
My wife is from Chicago, Dan, and her larger clan is a perfect example of what you're saying. I mean, her parents were devout daily communicants. My wife and I obviously practice, but the next generation just simply is not there. And it's curious because a lot of these people went to Catholic schools, they grew up in Catholic families, and yet perhaps it's the mass media as well as educational institutions that are doing it, but it's really had a huge impact on the church. Which brings me to the next question, which is, why did you hang on to your faith? I mean, what led you into a political career as a Catholic? Who inspired you, and why the Democratic Party? Why that party rather than some other party?
Well, I'll start with the last part first. Being where I am, where I grew up, the Democratic Party certainly is even more predominant now today than it was back then. But my father was in politics. He was an alderman in the Chicago City Council for 7 years before he ran for Congress. He served in Congress for 22 years, and he was a Democrat. It made sense for me to be a Democrat, and overall, if you look at the difference, and this used to be more of the case years, even 5-10 years ago, I would simply have stated, I believe that the government has a role to play in helping protect people who cannot protect themselves, or to solve collective action problems. The government needs to be involved. I wouldn't say I'm a big government Democrat. I think there needs to be more room for the private sector, but I think there are some things that only the government can do to help take care of people, protect people. And I'm not a libertarian. So that's why I've always been a Democrat. Support Social Security, Medicare. I believe strongly in protecting the environment, but unfortunately on a lot of issues, I think both parties have just really gotten much more radical on these various issues, and I think that's a problem for our country right now. But my Catholic faith, I think about it, and I am blessed by God to have this faith. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I have 2 engineering degrees before I got a PhD in political science, and I'm a skeptic. I'm just naturally a skeptic, and if you ask me, about my faith and why I believe it, and am I 100% sure? And I would say I'm not 100% sure of anything, but I have faith, and I know it's a rational faith from my experience, from what I read. I consider myself somewhat of a intellectual. I don't like that word, but I truly believe in God, in Jesus Christ was God's son who came to earth, and no matter how people look at that and say, well, that's outlandish, that's crazy. Well, I think people are too limited in what they sort of people are too limited in what they see as what's possible. And you have all these people in our country who believe in UFOs, and we certainly, I think, have more evidence of Jesus Christ being the Son of God. So I think there's a normal human. Humans want there to be something beyond us, and understand that there is something beyond us, and what we can see, what we can as scientists, what scientists can prove. And we have an innate sense that we understand that there is something else. And so, it's a constant tension that I have, and I think that's a good thing. And I think a lot of people don't admit that. A lot of believers don't admit that they ever have doubt. I have doubts. I think it was good when after Saint Mother Teresa died, her diaries came out, and so she had doubts. That's natural and that's human, and we have to admit that. But my faith is strong, and I really believe through the doubts, and I think it's important for all of us to help others in their belief. I think that's something that's critically important, and that certainly has helped me greatly, especially in the last couple of years as I've gone through politically what I've gone through. I haven't questioned my faith, but I've had a lot of people strengthen my faith and strengthen my understanding that my faith comes first, before politics, before my political career. And it's been other people, friends of mine, and other people who just randomly come up to me and tell me that they're very happy, thank me for standing for my faith and not giving in, and that's very helpful.
And I want to ask you, aside from your parents, who obviously had a huge impact on you, um, who you've modeled yourself on, or if you have a saint or something that really has affected you in your public service. But before we get to that, and this is not party specific, how did you feel as a believer in Congress? I mean, were you an anomaly, or is that fairly common in Congress across party lines, or it'd just be interesting to see how your faith was received in Congress as kind of an animating force in your political service.
Well, I have to say that it was more Republican Republican Catholics who I really had more in common with, and that's what I found. And it certainly were some Democrats, but it was, the church up on the there's a house side church and a senate side church, Catholic church, and so St. Peter's Church on the house side, we about once a month we'd have dinner. The pastor would have members of Congress over for dinner, and it'd usually be, although we'd have a couple Democrats and usually 3 times as many Republicans who would be there. That's not to say that the faith of there's no faith on the Democratic side, but I certainly found more in common with a lot of my Republican Catholic colleagues.
What about models in your own life? I mean, when you look to public service in other ages or other circumstances, who's inspired you, if anybody?
Well, so much of what how I saw what I should do as a elected official, so much of it came from my father. And I really, in so many ways, I saw what he did. I saw that he was a very independent Democrat, and he did what he thought was right, what he thought was right for his constituents, what he thought was right in his conscience. And I've always believed that's the way that I should live my life and live my service as a member of Congress. And unfortunately, today, there's so much pressure on both sides, just to follow the party line and to not even think. And that is very, very foreign to me. And I can't do that.
Yeah. It leads to the next question, Dan, which is, in both parties, you've mentioned that both parties have become more radical and more lockstep. I mean, we're facing an extremely toxic presidential election this year. You've expressed to me and to others that you're going to be supporting Joe Biden, and that's consistent with your Democratic convictions. You also have concerns about what his administration might do. The fact is that good people, good Catholics, are going to vote both ways. Some will be Trump people, some will be Biden people. I mean, how do you go about choosing in this circumstance? Not who should you vote for, but how do you go through the process of coming to a conscience-driven and morally legitimate decision from your perspective?
Well, we have a very difficult choice to make. I have remained a Democrat, and I have said that one of the reasons is to try to fight for a Democratic Party that has space for people who are pro-life, because I think it's important for the pro-life movement to not just be in one party. I think a big issue that there's a very real lack of understanding in this country right now is religious freedom and what that means. And that's something that has become more difficult especially in the Democratic Party. And so I'm trying to work from within the Democratic Party right now. But everyone has to look at, there's so many different things you can look at when we're talking about a president and making decisions. I mean, back in the 1990s, Bill Clinton and the way he the whole incident situation with Monica Lewinsky and impeachments, lying under oath, and a lot of people look at that and said, well, his life outside of what he did directly as president. I mean, there's no excuse for lying under oath, but they looked at a totality of, some people looked at the totality of everything else, and some said, no, he just, eliminates himself from my, competition for president because of what he did here. And, that's a question now when you look at Donald Trump, is sort of questioning, look, there's never been a president in history, although history is not that long of abortion. It's too long, but it's only 50 years as a real federal issue. There's never been a more pro-life president than Donald Trump, and I admit that. But the question is other things. Donald Trump, is it really helpful? Even if you just look at the pro-life movement, is he helpful in the long run to the pro-life movement? There's a lot of different things that you can look at, and there's no simple answer. And I would argue that there is no right or wrong answer as a Catholic, but you need to take it seriously. And we are not, you don't just make a decision and choose one and think that, well, I've done my job. As Catholics, we need to really continue to talk about how neither of these parties really is, a Catholic should not feel comfortable in either of these parties, and we need to try to change our political system and to change our society. We're called to that, and it's especially important right now.
Yeah, I never thought I'd say this, Dan, but Bill Clinton actually looks pretty good for his ability to tack to the center. That seems to have gone completely out of discussion. He did have the common sense to try to find some form of consensus centrist perspective that people could at least feel comfortable with. I never thought I'd say that, but in fact, it's true, because both parties have seemed to really double down on matters of ideology that make constructive discussion almost impossible. I think the last 4 years are a perfect example of that. But I want to go to the next question, which is, you go to Washington, you keep your faith, you keep your Catholic identity, and you serve your party and the people. A whole lot of people don't seem to be able to do that. What is it that why do well-intentioned people, well-intentioned Catholic elected officials, gradually lose their sense of mission or their specifically Catholic identity?
Well, I think a big issue, and I've watched this happen with others. And let me just say, I've had issues that I've struggled on and what to do from what I believe and what politically I should do. And it's not easy, but I always knew that it was very clear to me I was never on the issue. For example, most importantly on abortion, I was never going to change. And I was going to take as strong a position as I could on that issue. And I think others look at it. It's so easy to get wrapped up in, no one wants to lose. First of all, you're in politics, no one wants to lose.
Yeah.
And so that becomes sort of, and it becomes so much of an identity to you. And I understand, look, 16 years, this is my life has largely, revolved, 24/7 around, I'm a member of Congress. I'm always thinking about what I need to do in policy wise, politically. It just sort of envelops my whole life, and impacts my wife, and everything sort of centers around that. And I tell you, on election night, when I lost, it was a really tough night. And I really remember laying there in bed thinking, almost 16 years, 15 plus years at the time, 6 months ago, this is what my life has revolved around largely for, all this time. What do I have now? What am I going to do? I sort of feel, for that night, I sort of felt like, well, where does this all, what do I do now? In the ground's all shifted beneath me. But very quickly, I'll just say, and I'm amazed. I never thought I'd feel as good as I did. Here I am 6 months
I
after
give you
I
a gift, Dan.
I feel 100 times better than I ever thought I would feel. And why? Because immediately that next day, and I went and I did my concession speech, and I made a very strong point that I lost because I would not change my position on abortion, and I had someone say, "Well, why didn't you do what Tim Kaine did, and say you're just maintain your personal opposition to abortion?" And yeah, I've seen others do that. I could not do that, and I just deeply feel that. Look, I have to. I'm going to have to account for my life at the end, and there's nothing, even being in as a member of Congress, which is an honor. It's a great job. I love it, but that's not more important than the really doing what is right, and knowing that I'm going to have to account to God for that. And that next day also people started reaching out to me and thanking me for standing strong.
Mm-hmm.
And people who reached out to me, it just really, I changed, less than 24 hours after I lost, I felt so much better.
Yeah.
And I've continued to feel that way because I know I did the right thing, but I had that fear before I lost. What if I lose?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that it's hard for those who are not involved in politics to understand, or that feeling. And people who, I don't think I allowed the job to become, even though so much of my life had to revolve around it, it was not my identity. It wasn't the most important thing to me. It wasn't without being, Representative Congressman Lipinski, without being Congressman Lipinski, that I'm no one.
Mm-hmm.
I actually feel now that being who I am, being a witness for Christ and a witness for other Catholics, I think is much more important to me. And I think I've been able to do that over the last couple of years. I can continue to be able to do that outside of Congress.
Yeah, just for a point of information for those who don't know some of the background, Dan, the election that you're referring to is the primary, the Democratic Party primary, where the party actually stood up a candidate against you because of your convictions about things like abortion. And you lost that. That's what we're discussing here right now. But you also made a point in the comment that the comments that you just made that leads into another question. You're writing a book, obviously, and I want to hear about that. And it has to do with, I believe, at least some of the things we talked about in terms of politics as a form of idolatry, or how to handle politics as a Catholic believer. Why don't you tell us what is the book about and where are you going with it in terms of what you're writing?
Well, last year of 2019, I was honored to be the commencement speaker at Ave Maria University. And I spoke to the students about how they need to be Catholic first. We live in a society, our social and political worlds have become one, basically. I mean, this is a significant change from what things were even not that long ago. But we live in a very binary world where you have left, right, if you want to call it that. generally more or less fit up with the Democratic Republican Party. And there's just two ways of thinking. And there's this idea out there, I think, that there are only two sets of beliefs. And I'm afraid that young people especially feel like they need to fully subscribe to one of those two sets of beliefs. And neither of those do Catholics fit neatly into. And I said, okay, you need to choose, most elections you need to choose, are you going to vote for a Democrat or Republican? But you should not feel that you have to then fall into every belief of either one. You need to be Catholic first, and you need to make sure that you are out there. We are all out there in the public square because we need to change this world. We're called to change this world as Catholics. And there's no, in our country, I think there has never been as important time as this to be out there with a Catholic message. We have a very clear idea of Catholic social teaching, and we need to be out there in the public square on this. And part of that, it's not an issue such as abortion or religious freedom, but other issues of, for example, caring for the poor, caring for the environment. There aren't simple solutions on those issues. That's the other thing that I found in Congress. And I've been a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is Democrats and Republicans who sit down and try to come up with solutions to problems. And both sides, as we've mentioned earlier, seem to, they're both going to, one extreme or the other, and demanding that it's that way or no way. So many of these things, and as Catholics, there are things that, what's the best way to care for the poor? We are called to care for the poor. There's no question about that. What's the best way to do it? And we need to work and figure those out, and the best way to do that. But getting back to the book, so I'm writing the book to, give the message, especially to young people. I really want to evangelize young Catholics. That's what I want this next chapter of my life to be about, but telling them to be Catholic first, because we need to change this world. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with the world right now in our society. And if we have the courage to be Catholic, that we can change the world and show people the right way to go.
What's the name of the book, and what kind of time frame are we talking about it coming out?
Well, I'm still working on my, I'm still in Congress till January 2nd, so I'm still working on that. I have a couple ideas for titles. I'm not going to throw any of them out there right now.
Yeah. All right.
My plan is in January to sit down and really start writing. I have a basic chapter outline, but as I get back, I love to write. I love to write. I love to speak. I was a professor.
Notre Dame could really use you, Dan. I'm a grad, a 1970 grad, and you'd be perfect there. I mean, it's a great environment for exactly the kind of things that you're talking about.
And so I'm not sure. I will hopefully know what a little bit more in the coming months. But in terms of the book, it's going to be a while. I'll start hopefully seriously writing it in January. But I'm still working on what exactly I'm going to be doing come January.
Well, do you have any final observations? I know I've taken a lot of your time, but any parting thoughts?
Well, clearly I like to talk. Well, I want to, the Napa Institute, I unfortunately, there you go. My Napa Institute, sure, I'd make sure I showed that before the end. Napa is great, and we really need to build our Catholic communities. And I mentioned earlier how important it is that we support each other in our faith. And I think Napa does a great job of that, and also become more educated in our faith, which is critically important. We can't be it is a different, from my father's generation. I always say, and he would say he's a Baltimore Catechism Catholic. To my generation, and we need to become much more. In younger people today want that real. They're looking for answers, and they don't understand what they have this simplistic idea of the Catholic faith, and many of them are looking to really be intellectually challenged, and I think that's very important. I have to say, you mentioned earlier in terms of who I look to. I don't really know where my Catholic faith would be today if not for St. John Paul II. Growing up, I became Pope in 78. I was in sixth, seventh grade then. That was really incredibly helpful, especially being in Chicago, being Polish. I remember his visit to Chicago. It meant so much to me. And still today, I think the most important thing is I look at him, and if we talk about hope, I sometimes say it comes with being Polish. Polish people, I say, aren't known to be the most hopeful people usually. I think it's I attribute it to the history of Poland and the terrible history of, and somehow it doesn't. It's in the blood. Mm-hmm. I would say not optimistic. But
the difference between hope and optimism. I mean,
yeah,
big difference.
Yes, I've really learned that, St. John Paul II really has helped me so much with that. And I look at his life, and I look at what he went through, and losing all his immediate family. When by the time he's a teenager, and two of the worst, totalitarian governments, living through that brutality, and yet he had hope. Mm-hmm. And that has really taught me, so I do have hope. I don't know, but I'll say I don't know what God's plan is. And people, oftentimes I was interviewed for a pro-life movie that is just coming out, and I was asked for at the end to be hopeful about the future of pro-life in America, and I said, I always believe what Saint Mother Teresa had said. Our job is just to do what's right. And we don't have control over what is going to happen. We just have to have faith and have hope, and keep doing what we are called to do. And I think St. Pope John Paul II was just fantastic in that. And he's someone who, he is the first person that I want to meet if I am blessed to reach heaven.
Amen.
Amen. And what an incredible, remarkable, amazing man. And the more that I learn about him still, I feel that way. And it really is helpful for me and for my faith.
Dan, it's been wonderful talking with you. We're very, very grateful, and God bless you in what you do next, and keep it the book. It's going to be terrific, I'm sure. Thanks very much. God bless you.